Hello, everyone. So, just a heads up, I don't know if you've noticed, we're at capacity. So, if you haven't made a friend already, let's make a friend.
Start working.
So, first of all, I'd like to welcome you all here. I don't know if you've noticed, we're kind of full. So, if you haven't made a friend already, let's start making friends and squeeze in as much as we can so that everybody's got a place to seat. So, we are here today to go into our session, Break Glass, How to Securely Administer Jamf Computers using Jamf Pro LAPS. I am going to welcome to the stage our presenters Mark, Rob, and Bill. Just as a heads up, at the end of their session, there's going to be a Q&A. I will be running the microphone to you so that we can get all of our questions that are recorded, all of your great questions, and all of the fantastic answers. So, take it away.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you everyone here for joining us. My name is Mark, I'm a senior consulting engineer at Jamf. Joined here by my colleague Rob, who last year both of us presented on a similar topic of labs. Well, is my mic on?
Your mic is now on.
We'll try that again. I thought it sounded quiet. I'll start over. My name's Mark. I'm a consulting engineer here at Jamf, based out of Minneapolis. Here with my colleague Rob, who last year the two of us presented on this topic with LAPS and Jamf Pro. Some things have changed. Some things are maybe kind of similar. But we wanted to go through a lot of the different updates that are around it and kind of address this topic. And we brought along a great friend, Bill Smith, a technical enablement manager. All of us do different internal enablement at Jamf. We love to do external sharing of knowledge as well. And with that, we'll dive in. There you go, Rob.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, so let's get the show on the road. What is LAPS? Like, that's the question, that's why we're here, and how it relates with Jamf Pro. So, first thing, LAPS isn't a piece of software, like a package that we can install, right? It's not a command line tool built into Mac OS with some binary that's, there. If we continue on, it's not like a standard protocol that's well documented that goes between devices, right? Or an IP that all computer platforms share and interpolate with each other. Instead, think of it as a concept or a workflow, right? An idea. Even so, what is LAPS? Well, what is LAPS is a solution, right? And if we really pay attention to that, a solution, it's in the name, Local Administrator Password Solution, okay? Now the problem is, local administrator accounts, right? We can have them shared across entire fleets of computers. So if we're not using LAPS, we have an admin account. Now, if we go back a couple years with Jamf Pro, you would have an account, a management account on a device. It was an account, same password on all devices. A problem. Multiple admins would know these passwords. It was easy to share. There was no way of knowing when the account was used or who used it. And password, you could randomize it or something like that, but in general, it was a pain to have to update this password. So the whole part of LAPS is a solution, the solution, right? We want to create a unique password on every computer in the fleet. We want to stop sharing password, bad, right? Store them securely until needed. Audit the passwords when used. So if a user or an admin goes to use that password, we know that at this time the password was requested by this person, right? And then rotate the password automatically after viewing it. So none of this specifies a specific software to use, right? If we look at it, LAPS has been around for a while. It's, again, a solution, an idea, a workflow. Microsoft originally used it with Active Directory to store all passwords across AD domains, right, in Active Directory for auditing and rotation. Last year they implemented LAPS within Azure, right? There is an open source software on that. And on top of that, implemented in Jamf Pro since 11, we finished in 11.5. We started in 10.4.5.
5, yes.
10.4.5. My notes, they're not scrolling down. So let's take a quick look at implementing Jamf Pro LAPS, okay? So we want to simply We want to simply store each computer's unique administrator password account in the Jamf Pro database. Simple enough, right? So this is that solution bit. We want to keep track of which administrator requested to view the computer administrative password and log that date and time within Jamf Pro. It's important to note that there's no way of any administrator to alter the logging. There's nothing in Jamf Pro that can be altered. The only way to delete the log of the requested password within Jamf Pro is to delete the computer record. Okay? Now there's two different ways Jamf Pro can create an administrator account to rotate the password, right? Each method is slightly different. The method is Jamf Pro choose to implement. We can choose to implement, tongue twister there, or methods, because we can choose to implement both. There's the Jamf Pro framework way and the Jamf Pro MDM or pre-stage way. Sorry about that. So I'm going to hand it off to Bill, who probably won't be tongue twisted as me, to explain that.
Alrighty. The first method uses the Jamf binary. That's the tool that Jamf Pro installs on every computer as part of its management framework. We've installed the command line tool since Jamf Pro was known as Casper Suite, and it's still a critical component that allows Jamf Pro to do much of its management, including creating user accounts and changing passwords. So think of this as Jamf's technology. The second method uses Apple's MDM specification. That's their management standard, and it's been part of Casper Suite and later Jamf Pro since 2010. It too can create an administrator account and a password. Now think of that as Apple's technology. Both of these are well-established technologies that Jamf Pro strongly supports. But let's look at a couple of things. The Jamf binary can't keep an open connection to its managed computers all the time. Instead, it relies on the computers to phone home about every 15 minutes by default. And that means when it's time to rotate the computer's lapsed password, there could still be a delay of several minutes before that actually happens. And depending on your settings, that could be up to an hour. Now, the Jamf binary can do something that Apple's MDM implementation doesn't currently do, and that is it can manage file vault passwords. So what does that mean? It means if I use the Jamf binary to create and manage labs, the computer's account can receive a secure token, and an administrator can unlock a file vault encrypted computer using its admin password. So let's see what it takes to configure Jamf Pro to manage a labs account using the Jamf binary. In Jamf Pro, I'll go to Settings, and then Computer Management, and I'm going to click Security. And I'm going to click Edit and scroll all the way down. We have three settings to consider here. We can enable labs to create an account using Apple's mobile device management, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But more importantly, we'll want to set the rotation sorry, can you scroll for me, please? All right, thank you. We'll want to set the rotation interval and rotation after viewing interval. The first thing I want to point out is that because I'm choosing to use the Jamf binary method for managing labs, I don't need to enable this option. It's only if I want to use Apple's MDM method of managing labs. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. I have two other options here. The first option, rotation interval, is set to 1 day. That means every day, whether or not someone views the lapse account password in Jamf Pro, it's going to rotate. And I don't really think that's necessary. But for my security team's compliance requirements or something else, I'll at least rotate it maybe a couple of times a year. So I'll set it to 180 days. The second option, rotation after viewing interval, is set to 15 minutes. That means as soon as someone views the account password in Jamf Pro, it'll wait 15 minutes and then send the command to rotate the password. I think 15 minutes might be a little bit too quick, especially if a desktop technician is doing some kind of troubleshooting, like troubleshooting a problem. So I'm going to set this to a little bit higher value. So I'm going to bump this up to an hour. Now, let's save these settings and go look at the second piece of this. I'm going to go back to my settings and then back to global management and user-initiated enrollment. Here, I'm going to click Edit and then look at my options for computers. I want to turn on Create Manage Local Administrator Account. Now, this used to be called the Jamf Management Account, but it's been repurposed for LAPS now. I need to specify a name for the administrator account that I'll deploy to my computers, and I can choose whether to hide it from my end users in system settings. So keep in mind, if you choose to enable this account for File Vault later, it won't be hidden on the File Vault login window after turning it on for the computer. Again, if you turn on File Vault, you should also be using a personal recovery key in Jamf Pro. I would use that instead of turning on File Vault for the LAPS account. From here, all I need to do is save. All right. Every computer that I enroll from this point forward will receive a LAPS management account, but this won't put the LAPS account on computers that were already enrolled. I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. But what I prefer instead to use Apple's mobile device management to manage the LAPS account. First, I have to turn it on. Then I need to add it to my pre-stage enrollment. So let's go back to Settings and Computer Management, and we'll click Security. I'll click Edit and scroll all the way down again. And be careful, this doesn't disable the other LAPS account managed by the Jamf binary. All right, this time I'll select Enable LAPS for pre-stage accounts. It's possible to enable both types of LAPS accounts, but you should really only enable one or the other. A second admin account on a computer is just redundant, and it creates another account for a hacker to try to compromise.
Hey, hold up, Bill. This is where we need to use some caution. I just want to interject here because before checking this box, you really need to consider whether MDM LAPS management is the flavor that you want to use. Within documentation, there's other goodness on this that describes it, but it's important to know that once this is enabled for MDM LAPS, it is a global setting, meaning that if you have previously enrolled computers with a pre-stage that use a managed administrator created by MDM, the next time they submit inventory, they're going to morph into a LAPS account and have that password randomized. Now that may be well and good for many environments, but if your deployment workflow requires or stands on the shoulders of relying on that account to have a secure token and cryptographic capabilities, the MDM command, when it rotates, does not preserve those capabilities. So please reconsider that, or if you know that you do not want to enable the MDM LAPS, you might use Jamf Pro permissions to disallow junior administrators from modifying LAPS settings or the computer security. And the PSA.
Absolutely. All right. From here, I'm going to save, then I'll go to Computers, Pre-stage Enrollment, and edit my global pre-stage enrollment settings. And then under Account Settings, I'll click Create a Managed Local Administrator Account during macOS Setup Assistant. Now, this account is created during the Setup Assistant, whereas the Jamf binary account is created after the first user logs in. Now, really, that's not terribly important to this process, but it's a good thing to understand this whenever you're possibly troubleshooting account problems. I'm going to put in the same management account name that I specified for the Jamf binary, and I'll specify a password too. But this password isn't really that important because Jamf Pro is just simply going to change it to a random password as soon as the computer's enrolled. Just like the other LAPS account, I'll choose to hide and I'll click Save. I'm prompted to confirm my settings and, this is important. You can enable both the Jamf binary and the mobile device management LAPS account, but Jamf Pro is not going to let you use the same name for both. That's because we don't want you to have two different accounts, that's because we don't want to have two different methods for managing one account. So that would cause problems. I'll just change the name of this account to something slightly different, and now I can save. All right. Just like the Jamf binary, only computers enrolled from this point on will get that LAPS management account. Even if I had existing computers that were enrolled using this pre-stage enrollment, these pre-stage enrollment settings, this won't retroactively turn on LAPS. Now that I've configured LAPS on new and existing computers, I can start using it, and it's pretty simple to do. If I'm a desktop technician and need to do something on an end user computer that requires administrator privileges, either I or someone with access to Jamf Pro can locate the computer record and scroll down just a little bit to verify that it has a LAPS account available, and here it does. Here, I see it's an account managed using the Jamf binary. That's the one from my user-initiated enrollment settings. Now remember, I might see the administrator account from the pre-stage enrollment here as well. And again, while I don't recommend it, it is possible to enable both of these types of LAPS accounts. And I'll click the link to view accounts. All right. And local accounts password, and a little further down in the payloads list, at the top, I find the name of the account I can use, and I see the source of the account is the Jamf binary. I'll click the button to view the password. And here I see a notification that as soon as I view it, I have 1 hour until Jamf Pro rotates this password. I have that long to troubleshoot. If it takes longer than that, I'll need to come back and get an updated password. Now, don't forget, because this administrator account is managed using the Jamf binary, and depending on my check-in frequency settings, it might take up to another hour for the computer to check in with Jamf Pro and actually rotate that password. When I click continue, I see the password and the clock starts ticking. I can click the button to the right to copy the password to my clipboard, where I can use it however I need. I can use Terminal to SSH into a computer across the network. I can use Apple Remote Desktop to send a command, or even use Jamf Remote Assist. I'll only need the password when I'm prompted by something that actually requires elevated privileges. Now let's look at that password for a moment. I said earlier, it's a 30-character password. You'll notice a few things about it. First, it's a mix of letters and numbers and dashes, no symbols, and the dashes are important. You need to include them when typing the password. Next, all the letters are uppercase. You need to turn on caps lock when typing that password. And if you're like me, you question whether some of those letters are capital O's or zeros. They could be either, but when in doubt, paste the password into a text editor and change the font to a monospace font that clearly shows the difference between O's and zeros. The last piece of those 4 items that make up the LAPS solution is auditing. I need to know when and who viewed a password. Under the History tab, I'll click the Manage Local Administrator Account History Payload, where I see a log of all the activity for that computer. I see not only who and when, but whether the password was rotated automatically, or it was viewed, or is maybe pending rotation. All right.
Thanks, Bill. So thank you for that overview. As we're seeing, there's a number of different ways, basically the two different paths that you can deploy a LAPS account at the time of enrollment with Jamf, ensuring that you have that randomized password, permissions to access it, as well as the auditing history. But I wanted to step back and look back a little bit. What are we even doing here with a local account in the first place? I've always been under the impression, a lot of my security-minded friends that say that the best IT admin account is simply no account. That way you minimize your security attack surface as well. So I wanted to kind of take a little bit of a look back to some topics and coverage that we did in last year's session as well. Rob and I presented about LAPS and tried to have some pretty clear takeaways, specifically about what we consider the happy paths of deployment, ways that don't involve inserting any administrator password in a script to enable a token, or no ways to ask a user to put their password in to give tokens as well. But generally, these are those paths of least resistance, avoiding that friction in your enablement workflow. And we also detailed some of the life cycle of a Jamf LAPS account, the differences between MDM and Jamf binary created accounts and how they rotated it. And we kind of tried to steer things towards a clear conclusion. If you think that your IT administrator ever needs or should have a secure token and maintain that token through the rotation cycles, you should use the LAPS account created by the Jamf binary, the one that is made through user-initiated enrollment settings. The password reset that the binary uses does the same thing you would do with the sysadmin CTL binary of insert old password, set new password, and cryptographic privileges stay the same. Or another thing to consider that's also a low resistance happy path is simply as an alternative to even dealing with a local account. Regardless of the password security, you can simply enable File Vault instead of using an account. And the reason that File Vault can substitute for that is a numerous number of reasons. With File Vault, you can have a personal recovery key escrowed, and you get the benefits of having a key to facilitate password resets, an account, so to speak, that can access Recovery OS. So if there's anything that needs to be repaired in recovery, those of you that maintain user accounts that have standard permissions may have seen this before on Apple Silicon. That PRK can be used to repair things and then rotate it afterwards. And then finally, the biggest thing that I really love to share with people when it comes to Apple Silicon is you gain the ability to boot full stop a computer with Apple Silicon from the File Vault screen to the login window. And that's going to be where you have a network access. Maybe you have a login window where you can sign in with your identity provider in Jamf Connect, or simply you want to use a policy to create a one-time account, use it for the task at need, and then be sure to clean up and remove it when you're done. And just for a quick illustration of what that looks like, this started in Apple Silicon on macOS Monterey. Option Shift Return is the key command, and very straightforward. It just switches to the enter your PRK. A little bit different than the LAPS password because Apple's PRK input screen automatically fills the dashes for you. But in this case, I'm landing at a Jamf Connect screen, but it could be any login window context. So back to the topic of LAPS with Jamf Pro, assuming that for your organization's purposes that you've decided and gone through the sharply divided opinions of to have an account or not an account, if you're going to have one, have it be an account with that randomized password. With that, for the rest of the session, let's assume that you do want to deploy a managed local account as your break glass account. But that brings up a couple other questions. What about computers you've already deployed that don't have a managed local admin and you want to use one now? Maybe you've had different naming conventions for your user-initiated enrollment account over the years. Casper admin, imaging admin, what you name it. There's a lot of legacy names that could be out there. So looking at how you might get an account back added into the fold is ultimately going to be with some form of re-enrollment. So looking at re-enrollment, this is something that we'll start with looking at what does it look like to re-enroll with the MDM account. Maybe you want that MDM LAPS user simply because you don't want a known password from your pre-stage to stay known. You just want to randomize it and make it go. So this is something that Bill had showed you how to do. And with this command, it looks like this. We've all probably ran it within terminal, renew type enrollment with profiles or a simple profiles-n. Maybe we want to try this. Or,
Mark, you know the MDM spec. You can't do this, at least not without wiping and resetting the device, which I strongly discourage.
it's true. That account, if you weren't aware, can only be made through automated device enrollment in the setup assistant is the only time MDM can make it. So a little bit of a trick there. This is not the way to re-enroll. But if we flip over to the Jamf binary,
That question's on the test.
the question's on the test, yes. So the Jamf binary method, using the managed account from user-initiated enrollment, that can recreate it. And there's maybe a couple different ways to approach that, but here's one method that can be run programmatically, and it's a little bit longer, more complex, and requires that we generate an enrollment invitation. Maybe not even a need to take a picture of this. We've got some resources at the end that can help with this. But ultimately, this is the way today that we have for getting an account back on there, which is all well and good. However, before you re-enroll, consider a few things. Do you want that new standard naming convention? If you have a different environment with previous accounts, maybe you want to start with the new one. Maybe half of your fleet has the account and half of it doesn't. Those are things that you want to look at before you decide to go through a re-enrollment workflow to regenerate the account. And that kind of brings up the consideration of how do you succinctly and easily say, do I have account lapse admin 2024, or not to date it, but however you want to label it. This is something that we have in some of our resources, a very simple extension attribute that we find can be very useful to say, do I have this account, yes or no, and incorporate that into some of your targeting workflows. Excellent. And let's just take a deeper look at using a local admin. We mentioned a number of these things through the presentation already, so I'll go back one more. I'll keep it somewhat brief. Ideally, remember you have Jamf Pro. You can do a lot of things with it that maybe don't need an admin account. Your users may not want to have an account on there as well, or even the perception of that. That's certainly something worth considering. And this password is purposefully kind of long and difficult. And that account is kind of designed to be difficult to be used. It's really not a day-to-day account, not really intended for end users to elevate.
By design.
Yeah, by design, because there are different ways to handle elevation. We mentioned it as well, maybe not explicitly trying to turn on file vaults, not a great idea, but instead use the personal recovery and temporary accounts that you clean up when you can. So, quick summary of what's on there. But there's also a few other things good to know because there are a number of different ways that LAPS works, and I'll hand it back to Bill.
All right. So here's a few good things to know about using Jamf Pro to manage LAPS accounts. To begin with, a full Jamf Pro administrator can restrict who's allowed to view that LAPS account password. And that means I can restrict it to an IT group, like the help desk technicians, from viewing passwords, while allowing my desktop support technicians to view passwords. And I can further limit who's allowed to audit access to LAPS accounts to just Jamf Pro admins. For this to work as designed, I need each Jamf Pro user to log in with their own unique Jamf Pro account. No one should ever be sharing credentials to the same account. Furthermore, I need to make sure that only specific Jamf Pro administrators can edit user accounts themselves, so they don't end up creating something new. And I mentioned earlier, you can use the Jamf binary to re-enroll computers, and that's best done with a script. I have a script posted, and it's available to anyone using the Jamf IT URL with the laps-re-enroll suffix, and it'll take you to my GitHub gist, and the instructions are in the script itself. I'll give you a moment to capture that. And we'll have these in our resources at the end as well. It works by using a policy to re-enroll computers. And remember, it doesn't matter if they were originally enrolled using a pre-stage enrollment or user-initiated enrollment. This script is going to work for both. It then creates a launch daemon that simply updates inventory in Jamf Pro. And it has to do it this way because when when you go through re-enrollment, it changes the device signature. And that prevents the policy from actually reporting back to Jamf Pro saying whether it succeeded or failed. It just simply can't report back to Jamf Pro. Now, I could wait until the next inventory update, but that might be up to a week or more. And I can manage everything I showed you today using the Jamf Pro API. In fact, all the API work was done first in earlier releases of Jamf Pro more than a year ago. And what you see in the GUI today is built on that work. If you were testing LAPS in the API, be sure to update your scripts and workflows to the V2 endpoints. Now, there's also one thing the API offers today that's not in the GUI. It allows a Jamf Pro user to actually set the password for the computer instead of having to use a random 30-character password. And I'm glad it's only in the Jamf Pro GUI because, as Mark said before, the LAPS account really should be inconvenient to use to avoid using it more than necessary. If you're limiting the use of your local administrator accounts on your end users' computers, then you're holding it right, and that's a proper way to break glass.
Yeah, so as you can see here, we've set up a GitHub repo. It's just a text file, but it has everything you want for the resources. We all like takeaways, so we wanted to make sure you had some. There we listed the presentation for download, the EA, the script that Bill was talking about itself. Excuse me. Also part of the handouts of this, you should have a PDF with all that information there as well. And if not, you can capture the slide here, which is the Jamf IT Lake Labs 2024. So, yeah. I'm gonna keep that slide up because maybe some more pictures. But yeah, just go to that link. Again, part of the handouts, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, first of all, great job. Tons of stuff. I'm fairly certain people have questions. So, raise your hand. I will run to you. I will do my level best to get all of my steps in. I am going back here, and then you're next.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. That was awesome. Did I hear you correctly at the beginning that if you that you can use the LAPS account to get back into File Vault if you lost the recovery. Did I hear that correctly?
With that, there may have been something, I think with the way it was phrased,
Okay.
may have alluded to that. So when the LAPS account is created, whether it's MDM or via the Jamf agent, neither are going to have cryptographic privileges. The normal rules of tokens apply. First user to auth or log in generally are going to get it. But if you have had an event, maybe a help desk person has used it once, gone through the login window with the password, gets a bootstrap token, and therefore the secure token, that's going to preserve it. But without some sort of intervention, it won't have the token. But during rotation, it's only the Jamf binary rotation that preserves the secure token. So if you want to preserve it after rotate, that's where we steer you towards that.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you. Can I ask one more? I missed the command lines earlier to get to that File Vault password on the login screen. It was command.
Option Shift Return on Apple Silicon, macOS Monterey, or newer. And it just switches to enter the personal recovery key. So you know you're in the right place.
It's on the resources page as well. So
for like account creation during pre-stage, if we're using Jamf Connect to create accounts and we're wanting to like skip that account creation, I have to like turn on the pre-stage account, right? So
you have to turn the pre-stage account, but by default, the pre-stage account that you put in the pre-stage is not LAPS enabled.
oh, okay. I see.
Right? So you just don't. Jamf Connect, have them log in. If you need a LAPS account, we would recommend the Jamf framework.
Jamf binary. Okay, and that's the second checkbox there that says make it the administrator. There's like the top one that tells you to create it, and then there's one underneath it that tells you
Yeah, so you have to create it and then,
don't check the second box.
no, there are two boxes. That doesn't say make it administrator. One says that you want the admin to be hidden.
Right.
The standard and administrator is when you're generating an account. So that goes away. So you can skip it, or you make a standard account or administrator. If you're using Jamf Connect, you'll skip account creation, have a pre-stage account in there. If you don't want that pre-stage account in there, you can delete that account. And if you need a LAPS account, then you would use the Jamf binary version, right?
Okay, I guess what I'm asking, it says make the manage local administrator account MDM enabled.
Oh,
That is a checkbox that you, in 99 or more percentage of the world, is not going to want to use that.
Yeah.
And the reason is that on Mac OS, unless you're using mobile accounts bound to AD, only one account is allowed to be MDM enabled. So while the spec allows it and the checkbox is there, once you check that in the pre-stage, we have a little warning that is kind of an "are you sure" type of thing, because you need user level MDM if you need like a certificate in the login keychain or some functions like
For
that.
any of those who are aware of EduRoam, yeah, that's a SCEP-based profile SCEP to the user. Checking, marking that, and having someone log in, that wouldn't work. So,
And I want to kind of point out something about the LAPS account on computers. The computer and the account on the computer, they have absolutely no idea that they are LAPS accounts, that they're being LAPS managed. Only Jamf Pro really knows that it's doing LAPS management. For all practical purposes, these accounts are regular accounts, just like you would normally use.
So question also rolls into secure tokens, because that one has been a lovely thorn in my side from time to time. So logging with the Jamf local admin account that we create via the LAPS, hop into the machine, and then of course it'll generate a secure token. Not all the time, but I've had it do that from time to time. And then of course when the machine reboots, users about to log in, now they're confused, because now you'll see the accounts spit out, including the one for the one with the bootstrap or secure token now. Question is avoiding this. Have you had any workflows that you've run through to absolutely prevent it from generating secure tokens for accounts?
Sure. So not exactly in that way. So if an account, if the login window has a network access that it can talk to its MDM server, and if the logging in account does not have a secure token, there's no way to prevent macOS from requesting that token and blessing that account with a secure token. There's two different ways to approach it. Like if you really don't want that account to have a token, one method, and it's on some of Apple's documentation, is simply an FDE setup command line where you can see FDE setup, remove user, and the user, and that can remove the token. There's some other things that if you only have standard users with tokens, that may not work unless you demote that account to standard and then do that. So that can be a little bit of messing around. If you're simply just wanting to avoid the presence at the recovery screen, if you're on Apple Silicon, which now it's the majority, I would assume. If you're on Apple Silicon, I want to say Ventura 13.3 or newer, there's a login window key where you can hide administrators at the login window. So if your context is end users are standard users, even if your admin account has file vault privileges, they can be omitted from the login window screen. So kind of a neat thing. Apple Silicon is the only platform that accepts login window keys, and it was that version of Ventura, kind of the mid-cycle release that made that respected at the file vault screen too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there was a deprecation notice that password for pre-stage enrollment was going to go away, and now that deprecation notice has gone away, and there was a bit of an implicit, there will be a big blog post about a roadmap for LAPS, but nothing kind of additional has come out on that. Is there, additional features coming out for LAPS? And in particular, I'm looking for control over the number and the type of characters.
Sure. So I can take this. I'm not product team, but I do consult with them for that. I do know that those feature request considerations about setting password complexity are certainly in consideration. As far as the longer roadmap, I couldn't say. But one thing to your first point of about previously, it had been marked for several Jamf versions that things were going to be randomized just by default, no option from the pre-stage administrator. That was kind of taken back and taken out of the notes, and if anything is going to change with that, that would be announced again. But ultimately, as far as I'm aware of decisions, is that whole big warning thing that I jumped in of use caution with this, we don't want to be the one checking a box that has ill effects to a workflow that you may have already, because there's a lot of different ways to use Jamf Pro, and everyone sort of dials in the way that works for you, and we don't want to get in the way of that.
Beginning slides were like, the problem, one account and the same password on all devices. We want to get away from that, so yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, we've been creating a pre-stage admin account for years with a static password. If we go into settings, computer management, security, and we enable LAPS for pre-stage accounts, all the existing admin accounts that are out there, do they become LAPS enabled at that point, or no?
If they
They're
were
randomized.
Yeah, if it was created by the MDM command, yes, it would become randomized and join the list of LAPS accounts. Technical audience here, I'll give the technical detail. It's part of the device information MDM query, where a managed local administrator from MDM gets flagged in that response. So once MDM LAPS is enabled, if inventory sees a user with its GUID of that whole string of numbers, then it's going to do that rotate password MDM command. So for some environments, totally cool, and people really like that, but just know the way that you're using those accounts if you're currently relying on it having a token.
So that was our last question, and I know that personally when I leave a place, all of a sudden I get a certain bit away and realize, oh no, I should have asked that. So how can people get in touch with you if they have any more questions?
We're going to be at the booths most of the time.
We're going to be at the booths. There may have been a
Tomorrow there is a brain date scheduled with the three of us are going to try to join. I know I'll be there. I can't remember if they have conflicts or not, but we do have a brain date. I don't know if it's full, but if it's not, it's getting full.
Yep.
So look up a brain date for the break glass session that's related for this.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.